Psychedelics Today, a weekly podcast exploring the science and culture of the emerging psychedelic field with your hosts Kyle Buller and Joe Moore. Today on the show, I am joined by Dylan Beynon. Dylan is the founder and CEO of Mindbloom, a New York City-based mental health and well-being startup helping people to expand their human potential with clinical prescribed guided psychedelic medicines. They are using ketamine at the moment. There, he is partnering with clinicians, technologists, researchers, and patients to increase access to science-backed treatments, starting by reducing the cost of ketamine therapy for depression and anxiety by over 65%. We get into that topic on how they're reducing that by using technology in their practice in the episode today. And Dylan is also a 10-year psychedelic medicine patient, 3-time tech entrepreneur, and graduated from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania. So if you've been following psychedelic news, there's a chance you probably heard of Mindbloom, and you probably seen some articles recently floating around the internet. I know I have. Saw a couple articles online on Forbes, and one that was pretty recent about virtual ketamine sessions and how Mindbloom is using technology to offer at-home ketamine sessions. You could definitely check that out probably by Googling it. I was seeing a bunch of articles float around in the past week, so cool to see them get some press out there, and sounds like things are really taking off. And just a quick note on the at-home ketamine use. So Dr. Raquel Bennett also put out a statement at thecreatinstitute.com/COVID. And if you are in the ketamine space, if you're a practitioner, somebody who treats folks with ketamine, definitely check this out. Hoping to get Raquel on to talk about this statement and what's going on with the coronavirus and COVID-19. So yeah, really important and really interesting to see, technology be used in this way in time of crisis, and also be able to allow people to have these medicine experiences, during really heightened anxiety times. So I'll leave it at that for that intro for Mindbloom. I hope you enjoy this episode with Dylan. It was really fun to actually go to Mindbloom in New York City. I was there, I guess, a couple months ago at this point. Got to check out their setup over there and got to see where they have their treatments and everything. And we did this interview in one of the rooms there. So really thankful for Dylan to invite me down there and check the space out. Want to give a plug to the Psychedelic Liberty Summit hosted by Chacruna Institute. So if you remember one of our last episodes with Rob Heffernan, we talked about the Psychedelic Liberty Summit. Of course, with everything that's going on, they are switching to a virtual conference. So that conference has not been canceled, so you can definitely check this out. Really excited about that. It is going to be online and the virtual, because I didn't think I was going to be able to make it out there. So if you want to learn more, you can head on over to chacruna.net and grab your tickets. So the dates for that are going to be April 25th and the 26th. And if you use the coupon code Psychedelics Today, you can get 10% off. And again, that's for the Psychedelic Liberty Summit, and it is now a virtual conference. And it's cool to see a lot of these virtual webinars and conferences pop up. I just saw MAPS has a nice little webinar series happening too. And we're also increasing our webinar status over here at Psychedelics Today, which has been really fun. So definitely, if you haven't liked us on Facebook yet, definitely go over to facebook.com/Psychedelics Today and check that out. We're adding new webinar events all the time, streaming there. And, hopefully we can get some of that stuff up on Instagram for those that follow us over there as well. Today's show is brought to you by Onnit. If you want to go check out Onnit, onnit.com, ONNIT.com. You can use the coupon code today. And this episode is also brought to you by Audible. Audible is offering our listeners a free audiobook with a 30-day trial membership. Just go to audibletrial.com/psychedelics today and sign up. What am I listening to? I got some philosophy books and then I actually just finished up Tribe, which was a really awesome audiobook, especially really relevant to what's going on now, how humans bind together and kind of come together during these times of uncertainty, of chaos. Really kind of gives me hope for the future. We're in this together. And yeah, that was just a really comforting book to listen to. So definitely check that out. And what else is going on? So yeah, some of our events are on hold, or some of our breathwork events are on hold. We do have an upcoming Navigating Psychedelics for Clinicians and Therapists course that is launching in May. I believe the first Thursday of May, which is May 7th, I believe. And we have 2 classes, one starting at 2 p.m. Eastern Time and one starting at 7 p.m. Eastern Time as well. To learn more about our upcoming course, go on over to Psychedelics Today. No, well, yeah, you can go to Psychedelics Today, but psychedeliceducationcenter.com, and you can check out the course over there. Also, getting really excited to release a free / by donation course right now called Psychedelics and the Shadow. So stay tuned for that. We'll definitely be sending an email out about this course. Really excited. Been working on it for the past few months with Dr. Ido Cohen. Have a bunch of interviews lined up there exploring the shadow side of psychedelia. So really excited to finally get this out there. And again, you can check that out when it's live at psychedeliceducationcenter.com. And we'll also let folks know. So if you're not signed up for our email newsletter, definitely sign up there. Awesome. And if you like what we're doing over here at Psychedelics Today, subscribe to our show, iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, Google Podcasts. Leave a review. That helps us out a whole bunch. If you want to support the show, best way to do so is to share a post, a podcast, piece of our content. And if you want to support us and help keep the lights on over here, patreon.com/psychedelics today. And we would really appreciate anything. Helps us keep this podcast going, all the editing and servers, software, all that stuff. I'm wishing everybody well. Hope everybody's staying safe and healthy during this corona crisis here in the States and across the globe. So I hope everybody is staying safe. Hope your family, communities are staying safe and healthy. Let's stay grounded. We'll get through this together. And hopefully it passes. So thanks everybody for listening, and we will catch you on the other side. Hope you enjoy this episode with Dylan from Mindbloom. All right, welcome back to Psychedelics Today, everybody. Today, I am joined with the founder and CEO of Mindbloom, which is a psychedelic and ketamine clinic here in New York City. Is that correct? Is that how you would define the organization?
Yeah. Well, first, super pumped to be chatting and to be on today, Cal.
Yeah.
As we talked about earlier, huge fan, as is almost everybody on our team, avid listeners. Yeah, I mean, we're a mental health and well-being platform, delivering science-backed treatments in beautifully designed spaces and online. And our first treatment is guided ketamine therapy. And given that we're sitting now in a ketamine therapy space, I think it's pretty accurate.
Yeah, awesome. And your name is Dylan Beynon. Sorry. Yeah, so I'm excited to dig in, and thanks for inviting me down here. You guys have a really awesome space here. I really like the aesthetics, but yeah, we were kind of chatting about what you guys are doing here, and then even thinking about other locations and how you might change that over time. But yeah, let's give the listeners a little bit of background about like who you are, what Mindbloom is, and really kind of start digging in here.
Sure, absolutely. Where should we start?
A little bit about you. Like, what got you interested in psychedelics and to get the idea to start a company like this?
Cool. So first and foremost, I'm not a clinician or a doctor. Don't want anyone to think I am. What I am is an entrepreneur and a psychedelic medicine and ketamine therapy patient who's really passionate about the experiences I've had over the last 10 years and how they've been transformational for my life, and helping incredible clinicians like the ones that we partner with to bring this to the world in a way that makes it easier and better for them so they can get good outcomes for their clients. A couple of reasons that I started Mindbloom. One is that, as we chatted about a little bit, mental health care is like the number one public health crisis in the U.S. right now. And it's deeply personal to me, because I grew up in a family that was really afflicted with extreme mental illness. Most acutely lost my mother to addiction and schizophrenia. She has been homeless for a long time now, and it was a big part of my life growing up was, sort of being exposed to that. And probably because of growing up in sort of a turbulent background, I had a lot that I needed to get through that I didn't even really understand. In June of 2009, a really close, trusted friend of mine really pushed me to try MDMA. I was very against it because I grew up with an addict in my home. Saw how damaging that was, and would not touch, any illegal substances, despite the fact that I would drink heavily 4 nights a week in college, right? And I just knew that something needed to change with me, and so I decided to trust him. And it was, I'm sure we've all heard this a million times, but it was one of the most transformational events of my entire life. Like, fundamentally changed and catalyzed a journey for me to alter how I related to others in the world, being from someone who was very tribalistic, had their friends, but didn't like others, didn't want to do good things for the world, to somebody who could begin moving from being a pessimist to a rational optimist. And so over the past 10 years, my psychedelic experiences have been some of those meaningful and profound, and there's no way I would be where I am emotionally, psychologically, without those experiences.
Yeah. And did you enter into any sort of therapy before this? Like, working on, say, some of the stuff that you experienced with your mother? Have you ever been through any traditional mental health services, and just kind of maybe comparing what these psychedelic experiences really offered you in terms of healing versus maybe like a traditional way?
Yeah, that's a great question. There were probably a few different inflection points for me in my, emotional and psychological and maybe spiritual ontological journey. One was, even before my psychedelic experiences, was discovering positive psychology when I was in school at Penn. And as I started reading and learning about the science of happiness, which was just really burgeoning at that time, I started realizing, like, I'm not happy. And my viewpoint on happiness and fulfillment was super skewed. This time I was, 18, 19, going to the Wharton Business School, thinking I wanted to be an investment banker and make a ton of money. That's how I'm going to be happy. And as you started reading the research, like, that's actually wrong. And that means my whole worldview is wrong. And as you start learning about how important relationships are and examining, like, my relationships and how I relate to others, that was a big impetus for that. And I don't think if I had maybe learned about that, maybe I would not have been willing to try MDMA or something new like that. In terms of therapeutic experiences myself, so when I first tried MDMA and began experiencing psychedelic medicine, something that inherently made me realize it was making me better for me, it was making me better for others, people I related to, and it was making me better for the world. But I actually didn't know that there was a therapeutic modality. In essence, I was self-medicating without knowing it.
Right.
It was probably only up until like 5 years ago that I started learning about what the incredible people at MAPS were doing and all the other research behind psychedelic therapy, which of course made perfect sense because here I was getting therapeutic benefits and even doing on my own some of the sort of science-backed methodologies to get the most out of these medicines, like journaling, like intention setting, that I just discovered independently that people were using in clinical settings because they work. And then I had worked with therapists, and I've had different experiences. Sometimes for me, when I've worked with therapists, it can feel like it's very focused on the past and on the traumas. And I think when I started working with therapists, I was at a point where I really wanted to be focused a little bit more on the future. But I have had success with that. And maybe most relevant was about 18 months ago, I began working with a clinician doing ketamine therapy in a therapeutic context. And I think that was a big impetus into seeing, wow, when it's done in a therapeutic context, when it's done with intentions, when it's done in a context that, for especially most people without experience like me, feels really safe and legitimate and trusted, everything from the clinician, the methodology, the medicine, the space, that could have a profound effect on the actual experience and people gain the most out of it. So that was also, a big reason to, help work with these clinicians to bring it to more people in a therapeutic way.
Right. And that brings up like an interesting kind of question. And, if you don't feel comfortable sharing it, no worries. The difference between like your recreational use early on versus like having this more therapeutic container, and like, what would you say the difference is there for you of like, thinking back in the earlier years, kind of exploring versus like now I'm doing this more in a therapeutic container? Like, what did you notice kind of?
Yeah, it's a really interesting question. I almost think that recreational versus therapeutic in the way that I was experiencing it is a false dichotomy, because even though I was doing it without the guidance of a clinician or a healer, I've also had ceremonial experiences with maybe non-traditional Western medicine healers. Even though I was doing it without the guidance of a healer, there was so much intent going into it that it felt more like self-medicating.
Right.
So maybe the experiences would be considered recreational, and that they weren't led by a clinician, but they always felt very therapeutic. I think when discovering that there's a therapeutic paradigm, I think it does a lot. I think one, it prepares somebody to know that they can get a therapeutic benefit out of it. I think oftentimes, and I've had this experience even myself back then, doing something that is underground or is called recreational, maybe contain the experience. Maybe that's one reason that sacred ceremonies can be really beneficial for people, is because they're not feeling like they're doing this this thing they're not supposed to be doing.
Sketchy and
Exactly. I mean, I think that's something that Mindbloom sees a lot with the clients that come in. They often are looking for something that feels safe and legit and trustworthy, everything from the space to the medicine to the clinicians. And that's a major part of why maybe they haven't accessed or tried these medicines, for their depression or anxiety in the past.
Yeah. So I guess let's dig into like Mindbloom. Like, what is Mindbloom, and just give us a little pitch about what you're doing here.
Yeah, absolutely. Our goal is to build a next generation mental health and well-being platform that helps some of the world's top clinicians help patients with science-backed mental health treatments, both in beautifully designed spaces and online. So we're starting with guided ketamine therapy. It's just the first of many services and treatments, both prescription and non-prescription, that the clinicians that we work with will provide to patients. And our goal is really like threefold. The big goal is to help people get the most out of these medicines and treatments, and to transform lives and really help people achieve lasting breakthroughs. When it comes to ketamine therapy, and I think psychedelic medicine at large, we're really trying to increase access to these science-backed treatments. So we think that means making it more approachable and friendly, because it can be really scary just by virtue of what it is for a lot of people. And it can also be, in the way it's practiced today, oftentimes very, very clinical, like a hospital setting, and that can be tough for people. Two, it's to make it more accessible by making it more affordable. So, ketamine clinics can range from, or ketamine therapy offices, from $600 to $1,200 a session on average right now. And Mindbloom sessions are $150 to $250, depending on where you are in sort of treatment. And then three is to create a much more elevated, improved client experience. So give people the ability to really feel comfortable and safe and informed throughout treatment. And we do that with the spaces, and we also do that through our software application that guides people through the experience, where we have and are continuing to add psychedelic therapy oriented programs with text and audio and video to help people as an adjunct to the treatment, as adjunct to therapy, if they add on therapy, to get the most out of the treatment with preparation, in-flight audioscapes, and integration videos and content.
Interesting. And when you said software, it just reminded me, you said you used to be in software before starting this. And what has that transition been like? Maybe not being in the clinical space, being in a totally different world, and then getting inspired through some of your own experiences and, having this history of dealing with a family member with mental health issues to want to be able to bring this more to the world and offer healing. Like, what has that been like for you?
Yeah. So all three companies that I've founded now have been companies that have been meaningful to me and also all been focused on increasing access. My first software company was called Voters Friend. We're a platform to help people become informed voters and to help local politicians really get their name out and connect with highly engaged voters in their area. And that was born of the fact that the first time I went to vote, I did as much research, I think, as one possibly could, walked in and realized I didn't know 80% of the people on the ballot. So this is obscene. So that was a platform we built that was acquired by a company called democracy.com. And that was all about increasing access to democracy and especially increasing access to data about local politicians. The next company I co-founded, Mighty, which is still around today, was all about increasing access to social justice. And what we were trying to do was help the millions of people who get injured in the US every year, who are now in these long, protracted battles with giant insurance companies, get a better deal from the justice system. And one of the things we saw was that like 70% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck. And if you get in an accident and like you could probably get a settlement in a month or two based on the data, but insurance companies drag it out for years, that puts people in a really tough spot. And I grew up working class with essentially a single working father who's a mailman and now a bus driver. And, we never had any financial disasters, but if he got in an accident, that would have been, incredibly disastrous, cataclysmic for us.
Right.
And so this company, Mindbloom, is about, maybe the thing I'm most passionate about, and is, about increasing access to these transformational medicines that have had a huge transformation on my life. So, it's really just a real special privilege that I'm grateful for every day to get to use the skills that I've built, building companies over the past, decade in a space that I'm most excited about, and to help these clinicians, like our medical director, Dr. Casey Palios, and the clinicians, that he brings on board to bring these medicines to more people and support the clinicians with the space, the content, the software, and helping them, however we can.
Yeah. So what do you think makes Mindbloom like a little bit different from some of the other ketamine centers out there that like maybe you've researched that, there's definitely tons of people doing awesome work. Like I know the folks over at Polaris and Healing Realms out in the Bay Area. And then on the other side, you have more kind of like IV infusion clinics where, probably much, much different than what you're trying to do here and what some of the CAP therapies are trying to do. So yeah, what's your approach here and how do you think you differ from other facilities?
Yeah. So the protocol that Dr. Casey Palios, our medical director, who is he's a trailblazer in the field. He's a principal investigator or co-principal investigator on the MDMA clinical trials with MAPS here in the city. He ran some of the first ketamine for depression studies like 10 years ago, like way back in the day.
I didn't know that. That's cool.
Yeah. And he also has been a study therapist for psilocybin-assisted therapy for cancer anxiety. There's actually a really cool article that just came out a couple of weeks ago that followed all of the participants from the study that he did. That was years and years ago that, no surprise, like 80% of the respondents are still seeing like meaningful, measurable results from the treatment. So one is that the protocols that Mindbloom are using, I think, are CAP. So, we are definitely a CAP-oriented company versus like a ketamine clinic. I think some of the ways that we're a little different, I don't think we're different in terms of the overall protocols, which are like, I think most people who are doing it out in the space are backed by significant clinical research and completely sort of down the fairway science-backed medicine based on the research available today. And based on, Dr. Casey Palios' experience in his own private practice doing ketamine therapy for the last several years. I think some of the ways we are different is, one, the complete focus on increasing access to the medicines. So whereas a lot of other ketamine treatment options are like $600 to $1,200 a dose or a session, depending on the model. Mindbloom is right now $150 to $250 per session.
How are you keeping those costs down?
So there are a few ways. One is by the introduction of technology. It's I saw the Bill Gates documentary on Netflix recently. He was talking about how hammer and nail bias, like he's a technologist. So if he sees a problem, he tries to use technology, right? Like that's he's a hammer and that's his nail. I think similarly, because of my background in software, even though I'm not a clinician and have gotten clinicians and a really great clinical team around the table to make sure that for them to be practicing the medicine and having great protocols, I have been able to help hopefully bring some good technology and software tools to the clinicians and to the clients to make them more effective. So that includes our software application that patients use and that the guides and clinicians here at Mindbloom use to help make the whole thing more efficient and effective. And that includes a lot of content that helps people prepare and integrate, in addition to the treatment. Another thing we do is in ketamine clinics who are doing like intravenous injections, oftentimes the injection is the only treatment provided. So in Mindbloom, we've seen that the science-backed research demonstrates that ketamine works on its own. The clinicians are still always doing psychiatric evaluations, preparation, debriefs, and integration with the clients. But if the clients want to add integration therapy and go deeper, then they're able to add on integration therapy. And so this is sort of aligned with the movement towards like patient-centered and patient choice care, of giving patients as good of care as you can to help them get good outcomes, especially backed by research and backed by best practices, but allowing the patient to choose what level of care is the best fit for them in concert with them. And that's something that our clinicians have spearheaded that we think is helping to increase access, because it allows the price of treatment to remain affordable for people, while also giving them the ability to go a lot deeper with the clinicians as needed. Yeah.
And you say with like the software, you're talking about giving information to people for like prep and integration. So, are these like videos or just like kind of psycho eds, so people have access to maybe what they expect or how to prepare? So that's also not being like, you have to charge for the clinician to have these info sessions. Like you kind of give that to them beforehand, so they're already preparing before they come in for the session. Or how does that work? I'm just kind of curious.
Yeah, so before they come in for their session, they'll already have done a video consult and evaluation with a psychiatric clinician and done preparation work. But in addition to that, we have and are continuing to build out a deep library of programs as an adjunct to the therapy that are sort of given in concert with the therapy. So it's like personalized to people, that does everything from helping them to prepare while also helping them to get the most out of the treatment and really sort of direct it towards what they have going on. So right now we have a few introductory programs on sort of introduction to psychedelic therapy and ketamine therapy that teaches sort of the basics of preparation, set and setting. A lot of clients who come in, I think it's surprised the clinicians and us at first, like didn't know what they were supposed to do.
Right.
And just teaching them about, trust, let go, be open during the experience, and that things will come up from their inner psyche and how to like observe has been really meaningful. And so helping to prepare people for that, even before they come in, and sort of teach them the ins and outs of psychedelic therapy. And a big part of that too is the integration. So, we are helping them, even if they're not working with the clinician in that moment, the weeks between treatments, because Mindbloom is a 4-session program, usually for like 1 to 2 months, to journal on the experience, why journaling is important, how to make sense of their experience, and really helping them create an integration action plan so that they can, take those insights and take that, upregulated neuroplastic state and make the most of it.
Yeah, and that's so important. I talked to Dr. Jessica Katzman about this with the neuroplasticity effect of ketamine, and I think even just psychedelics in general. Like, how do we use the next few days, the next few weeks after a session to really, ingrain new pathways, habits, and to really focus on that? And I always come back to that thing Dan Siegel said. Neurons that fire together wire together, and it's like, we can get caught up in these loops. And now with like psychedelics, you kind of break free a little bit for a little bit of time, and you can make these new neural connections, and then that's the perfect time to actually focus on making change and hopefully wiring new connections and making those connections stronger, versus like kind of letting it go, and then these new neural kind of just fizzle out, and then you go back to the normal like thought patterns and loops. So yeah, I think the integration part is so important there, and it's cool that you're using like software and technology to help clients do that.
Yeah, I mean, I could agree more. The integration is the most critical part, right? Helping people make sense and interpret the experience, decide what to do about it, and then actually follow through with it. It's one of the reasons that we don't see ourselves just as a ketamine or even maybe as a psychedelic medicine company, but really trying to build an integrative mental health and well-being platform that even after the psychedelic medicine experiences, for people's depression and anxiety that they're coming in with, to build a lasting relationship to actually help them follow through and make the most out of them long term. The neuroplastic state, though, is fascinating, and we just put up a long neuroscience of ketamine piece up on the science section of our website that goes deep into the neuroscience based on the understanding and research that exists today. One of our clinical advisors, Dr. Teddy Akiki, is at the Cleveland Clinic and is really at the forefront of doing neuroimaging around these rapid-acting antidepressants, RADs, like ketamine, including ketamine. And I think what they're finding is that there's this 3 to 14 day approximately period where brain-derived neurotrophic factor, BDNF, which is like HGH for your brain, remains upregulated in the brain. And that induces synaptogenesis, like you said, these new connections. And I've just learned about this over the past couple of years. And like we were talking about earlier, before I started recording, it just made perfect sense because in my experiences, with psychedelics over the past 10 years, I have felt this incredible lateral thinking and creativity and the ability to see my bad habits and the things holding me back, but actually change them very quickly afterwards. And to your point, what you do in that period to build those new pathways and solidify them is critical. And in addition to the clinical research on ketamine treatment, it's a big reason that I think our clinicians and clinical advisory team built a 4-session protocol over a month or two so that each program compounds so that people can get into this neuroplastic state, make these new connections, and really deepen the grooves of the new neural pathways that are healthier. And I know you're a Stan Groff fan, as am I. One of the things our medical director Casey talks about a lot is the inner healing intelligence, right? That our bodies want to be healthy, and when you help people upregulate BDNF, shut down the default mode network, and get out of these ruminative neural pathways, the body wants to heal and it wants to create healthier pathways.
Right.
Maybe that's one of the reasons that even if there isn't a sort of therapeutic container and people are still receiving ketamine in infusion clinics, the research still is showing that it's helping a lot of people.
Yeah, totally. And we kind of touched on this a little bit when I was at CREA, the CREA conference. Dr. Jason Wallach was even saying sometimes it's also on the dose. He was saying the psychedelic effect or the dissociative effect of ketamine to get there is almost like a biomarker for the antidepressant effect. And yeah, you are getting a benefit whether or not, we think that it's the transpersonal experience and holding that and really working with that. But yeah, there is also a biological mechanism there where this is also having antidepressant effects.
Yeah, that's interesting. Measuring the dissociative effect is a proxy for the neurochemical effects, right? The upregulation of BDNF. It's I learned recently that fMRIs, functional MRIs, are measuring blood flow in the brain. So that's a proxy for brain activity, but it's not brain activity, right?
Right, yeah.
One of the things that our head of clinical operations, Jack Swain, in concert with Dr. Casey Palios, our medical director, have done is create a which is also delivered through the software and makes it a little easier for people, but create a lot of check-ins with clients from when they first, before even they receive treatment, throughout their treatment, and then long-term, looking at scales of things like their depression or anxiety, based on like established, accepted scales from the National Institute of Mental Health, meaning and purpose and connection, as well as dissociation. One of the things we're excited about is to start publishing this outcomes data, which will at least be baby steps into both making this a little more accepted and approachable and mainstream, and also getting insurers and employer groups to begin backing and accepting this as a legitimate insurable treatment. And yeah, we're also really excited to see how those actual outcomes track against the levels of dissociation.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. And yeah, the idea of like including software into treatment is just so fascinating. It reminds me, I used to recommend some sort of emotion tracking program when I was doing my internship at the college. Like my supervisor was always like, "Oh, share this tool with somebody." And I mean, most of the college kids never used it. But just thinking about pairing some sort of technology to track different emotions and track like maybe integration practices, but having this technology or software to interact with outside. And it sounds like you're collecting some data from that as well to be able to publish it.
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting, right? There's software that's done effectively where it makes people's lives easier and simpler and more convenient. I forget the quote who it's by, but it's like the quote. It's like the best technology is like appears invisible.
Right.
Right. And yeah, the goal of the software is to help make it easier and more effective, create value for both the clients and the clinicians. In terms of collecting the data, I mean, that's one of the things that we're seeing makes it easier for people, because if you wanted somebody throughout every course of treatment, maybe like a traditional practice, to like fill out a paper form, like with 20 questions, like every time they come in, or then like have to do it at home, it becomes really burdensome.
Right.
But being able to just flip open their phone, see that they have an update and that the medical team, requires some information in order to help personalize their treatments and make sure that it's tracking well, and they're able to like quickly do it on their own time, is helping to both make the treatment itself more accessible and convenient, as well as help actually collect that data. So the clinicians and the company, can understand how to continue to improve treatment for people and match the right clinician to the right patient in the right way at the right time with the right medicine, as well as to begin publishing this data to hopefully help other clinicians and to promote the cause.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. Pretty awesome. So you said you do a 4-week program. Could you break that down, what that looks like?
Yeah. So Mindbloom programs today are that the clinicians prescribe are 4 sessions. They are currently prescribing for depression or anxiety, and specifically ketamine therapy. That's where we're starting. The way it works is somebody completes a candidate survey on the website. If they're potentially a fit, clinicians schedule a video consult with them, where they will go into their symptoms and psychiatric evaluation and history and goals, and help them, if they're a medical fit, begin preparing for the experience. From there, they schedule their first in-person session here. And throughout every 4 sessions of the 1 to 2 month program, we help them prepare for the session, get meditations and music that are designed for the session, for the program that they're doing, and have a sort of personalized integration plan after each session for the week between the sessions. And then after the program, if somebody feels like they want to go deeper or explore something else, and the clinician thinks it's, in their medical judgment, a fit to continue treatment, then they have the option to renew. Right now, it's $1,000 for the initial 4-session program and $600 for the 4-session renewal program.
Okay, doesn't sound too bad. $600 for the post. And what does the session look like? Are you guys using lozenges? Is the therapist in the room with the client? Are they sitting next to them? Like what does that look like?
So we're using rapid dissolve tablets, which I think are similar to lozenges, but they dissolve rapidly. But similarly, they're placed under the tongue. Then somebody listens to a guided meditation that is teed up for about 7 to 10 minutes. After that time, they're actually spitting the medicine out.
Oh, interesting. They're not swallowing it or...
Yeah, so when swallowed, it creates essentially a different, like, complete like dose curve, because when you take it sublingually, it's absorbed through the sublingual and buccal membranes in your cheek directly into your bloodstream. When swallowed, it will now be metabolized over like a longer period of time. And in addition, it's partially broken down in the liver into norketamine, which is a different compound or different substance, which can have more like sedative-like effects and also a different dose curve. So the clinicians have found a lot of success and sort of repeatability, having people just spit it out.
Huh. It's interesting. I haven't heard that before.
And then, and then after they spit it, then there's about an hour of, soundscapes, generally really sort of mellow, uplifting, no vocals. I think one of the things they found is that if the music is sort of too, volatile or, exciting or has vocals, then it can really sort of direct the experience too much. And I think what they're going for is to really help people have what comes up from their inner psyche and to really make sure that they're both in a good mindset going in, but also throughout the experience are able to have their own experience. After that, they move to an integration room, which is next door, where they are journaling on the experience. So, they receive a journal, fresh fruit, refreshing drinks. And after they've journaled and sort of reflected anywhere from, 20 minutes to an hour, whatever sort of they feel comfortable with, then they meet again with the clinician to debrief, decide what to do with the next course of treatment, and receive a medical discharge if they're sort of fit and ready to be discharged.
Mm-hmm. And I forget, did you say that the clinician or therapist is in the room the whole time with them? And I know that you have 2 chairs in there, so you might have 2 clients in there at the same time, or how does...
Yeah, so clients are monitored on video, and the clinician and the guide here at the space, who's a non-clinician supporter who checks people in and helps run the space with the clinician, do check in, but they want the clients to have their own experience. So they're kicked back in a zero gravity chair. You saw
my chairs do look really nice.
They're really nice. They're really nice. Part of the impetus for the chair actually is funny. Went to an experience while we were designing this location called Newcom. They like hook these like electrodes up to you and give you binaural beats, and it's supposed to like calm your nervous system. But the entire experience was an hour long. I just kept wondering if like my perception of the universe was wobbling or if the chair was wobbling. And afterwards I looked down at the recliner and it had just like a single point of contact with the floor. And I was like, oh wow, we really need to over invest in, whatever mechanism we're allowing the clients to like lay in. That's critical.
Yeah.
So they're kicked back with an eye shade, noise canceling headphones in the recliner. And they're being monitored, but nobody is in the room with them at that time. They have a call button. And so, if they're, if they need to speak to the clinician or, need to talk to someone, they'll hit the call button. Nobody's actually done that yet, which is interesting. Over the few hundred sessions that have been facilitated since we, started doing this. And, the clinician's been doing this for a while. Like I said, Casey's a real pioneer and trailblazer in the space. But we just launched like our website in January and the software itself in February, or maybe like late January.
Yeah, so it's still pretty new.
Yeah, it's definitely new. I mean, like I said, everything the clinicians are doing is backed by their research and backed by the clinical team's like individual experience and expertise. But Mindbloom itself is definitely in its early days. We're just beginning to design the flagship facility, that we'll be building next here in New York, and are working towards expanding to other locations as part of our mission to help really increase access to these medicines and help people expand their human potential. But yeah, it's probably day 1 or 2 in psychedelics, and it's day 0 at Mindbloom.
Yeah. That's awesome. Just that idea of like not having the clinician in there with the client. I was just listening to a podcast on the way over about salvia.
Yeah,
Totally.
I've had my experiences with salvia. Don't know if I care for it.
Yeah, I don't know. It just keeps coming back around, and I'm just like becoming so curious about like, I don't know, that plant in general. It just keeps coming up. So I've just been listening to some stuff. But I was listening to Dan Siebert, who's like an expert in salvia, and he was just talking about like, having a sitter there is important, but it's also really important just let the person have their experience and don't intervene at all, right? And I think about with like psychedelic medicines, there's this like dynamic here between like trying to do therapy. I know with like the MDMA therapy, you just, would let them sit there. If stuff comes up, they're there to chat. Obviously, MDMA is a little bit longer. I'm thinking about my own legal ketamine session. It was very psycholytic. I was chatting a lot. I was talking. I was having that therapy, which felt really nice. And it felt like I did want to process a lot with this person. But I think there's also something too to just kind of letting somebody have their own experience and not intervening, and then checking in with them afterwards. So I don't know. Any thoughts about that? I mean, I know, you're not more in that clinical space, but just like talking to Casey and whatnot.
Yeah. I mean, I have my own personal philosophy, someone who's done therapeutic work, who's done, call more ceremonial work, and who's someone who's, done stuff just on my own. The protocols at Mindbloom were developed by Casey and our clinical advisory team. And I think a lot of it was inspired by the MAPS protocols, where Casey is a co-principal investigator on the phase 3 trials. And as a result, the philosophy is to allow people to have their own experience, especially with ketamine, which is only an hour long, sometimes briefer, sometimes a little longer. That's not even a lot of time to go through something. So I think the philosophy there is to help people with therapy, and my mom also provides the option for one-on-one virtual integration therapy, either before sessions or after sessions, to dig into some of that. But I think the answer is we don't quite know. One of the things we were discussing before we started recording here was the idea that it's still day one in understanding how to help people get the most out of these medicines. And if I think about a big thing that we are doing long term is really cracking this equation of, how to helping people get the most out of these medicines equals like getting better at matching right patient to right clinician with right medicine, with like the right methodology or modality or program, like at the right time. And yeah, I think we're excited to continue working with and exploring how to do that with people. One thing that not doing the therapy itself with somebody does is reduce the costs and increase accessibility too.
Right.
But that wasn't why our clinicians made that decision. I think it was because, I know it's because they felt that was actually the best way to help people get the best out of the medicine.
Interesting. And so you just refer people to either have their own therapist to go back to, or just kind of doing these virtual online integration sessions with somebody else?
Yeah, and that's what the clinicians and the protocols have decided today.
Might change.
Totally.
Yeah. Yeah, I think like you said, like we are kind of in this like early phase of like seeing what works, seeing what doesn't work. And I think there's like huge potential here to create new models and frameworks. And, maybe the models that we're pulling from the 50s and 60s aren't always the best. And maybe, we need to evolve and create new frameworks to work with. And how could we bring in ceremonial aspects? I know we chatted a little bit before recording about that. It's like, what type of effect does that have in the role of healing? And so, I don't know. I think this is probably a very exciting time for a lot of this stuff, just because of the potential to create new frameworks here.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. Even in our first space over the first few hundred sessions, one of the things we've seen is a lot of people request couples therapy, request group therapy, and so as we've begun designing our next facility, we're already beginning to work in group therapy room and a more like couples and close friend therapy room, because that is something that looks like clients are gonna want or need to help them get the most out of these medicines. Yeah.
So I think we have to start wrapping up here. I think we need to leave this room. But there was one topic that I really wanted to touch on a little bit more in detail. And I know this is kind of just like compacting everything into like a few sentences. Any thoughts about accessibility that we haven't touched on that you think is important? Just thinking about accessibility with psychedelic medicines and, a lot of new businesses coming on the scene here, how you guys are approaching it. I mean, this is a huge, huge topic. I remember somebody at Horizon said, there's people that can't even afford mental health care.
Mm-hmm.
How do we make this more accessible? I mean, people are definitely not going to be able to afford psychedelic therapy if they can't even afford just basic therapy. So I don't know, any thoughts, ideas around accessibility with psychedelics and maybe what you guys might be thinking about in the future?
Yeah. I mean, I think the more people who are thinking critically about this and putting their intentions and their work into the world is going to help a lot. The way that we think about it in terms of like our approach to help making it accessible, and there are undoubtedly a lot of different approaches, and our approach will likely change over time, is one, first and foremost, cost. I'm, in my early 30s, I've been working for a while. I've had some success, but even for me as a ketamine patient, $1,200 or $1,000 a session is like out of reach. Mm-hmm. So much less when I think about my working class father, like that's obscene. So first and foremost, making it more accessible is cost. And I think down the road, a big component of that but this is going to take a while, will be to have insurance support it.
Yeah, why we need research.
Yeah, more research, more data, more outcomes, more, just patient stories. And I think we'll get there, but, we're going to need to push that. And so that's, a huge priority for us sort of on the back end, is helping to promote that cause, both in terms of reducing costs as much as possible in a safe, science-backed way today, as well as setting up to reduce costs in the future. I think another big piece of accessibility that we see is the, call it like the appearance or the brand of like psychedelic medicine, and helping to make it more approachable and friendly to people who are so new to it that it's scary.
Yeah.
I mean, I recently spoke to someone who was, interested in learning more about Mindbloom. He actually dropped in to the space the other day. We don't do drop-ins, but hours online. And I spoke to him for an hour and a half. And wow. It was just a lot of fear over something that, even though he was a really intelligent physics major at a university here in the city, he just had a lot of fear over something that was so new to him, even though he has read the books, read the research, and, really wants to do this. So I think continuing to think thoughtfully about how to still bring sacredness and specialness and ritual and almost like the magic of psychedelic medicine, I think you and I have experienced, to people who want to experience this, but in a way that feels approachable to them, while not watering it down and diluting it,
right,
is a big challenge, and something that we're working on, and definitely aren't there yet, but are sort of taking our first step forward and are excited to figure out how to bring to people.
Yeah, awesome. All right, Dylan, I think we're wrapping up here. So any last words of wisdom, pieces of advice, and then where can people find you? Where can people learn more about Mindbloom?
I mean, you can find us at mindbloom.co. And I think we can just wrap it up here and keep this short for your audience. And just want to thank you, Kyle, for the work that you're doing to make this more accessible and approachable to people by getting really good information out there for people, and for having me on.
Yeah, and thanks for inviting me to the space. Always awesome to do in-person interviews and actually to see the space. I really enjoy it. So thank you for having me here.
Awesome. My pleasure, Kyle. Thank you.
All right. Hello, everybody. Welcome back. I hope you enjoyed that episode with Dylan Beynon from Mindbloom. If you want to learn more about Mindbloom, you can definitely check them out at mindbloom.co. That's mindbloom.co. So yeah, if you're in the New York City area, you want to maybe see what their services are and they could be helpful, definitely check them out, mindbloom.com. Yeah, it was really great to actually go down and see their site in person and what they're doing down there. So yeah, thanks again, Dylan, for inviting me down. Had a wonderful time chatting with you and wish we had more time. We were getting kicked out of that office space. We were getting close to them opening up and needing to see some clients. So yeah, I could have chatted more with Dylan and really wanted to dig a little bit more into that topic of accessibility and whatnot, but hopefully next time. Yeah, thanks again for listening, everybody. If you have any questions, comments, anything like that, feel free to email us, psychedelicstodayemail@gmail.com. And be sure to subscribe to our show, Stitcher, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, wherever you're listening to podcasts. And we will catch you on the next episode of Psychedelics Today. And be well, everybody. Stay safe, stay healthy. Wishing you all the best. Take care.